Reverend
on Morning
Al,
Joe.
Here's how the candidate's performance is being scored by the major papers. The New York Times said Biden cleared a low bar, but was not particularly fluent. The Times called Harris unsteady. Booker, best in class performance. And more on the former vice president. He is still old, he is still nostalgic, and he is still the front runner until someone can prove otherwise. Far from perfect and rarely exactly steady, Mr. Biden nonetheless achieved at least some of the goals that eluded him last time. The Washington Post declared the winner as Trump, the debater. Also, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, even though they weren't on the stage. The losers, Kamala Harris. Quote, she was at times halting and didn't seem fully ready for the challenge at hand. And Joe Biden, quote, he wasn't as bad as last time, but he wasn't good either. And this from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, Biden's performance, which grew stronger throughout the night, may help silence some questions about his viability as a potential nominee and a chief foil of Mr. Trump. Al, let me bring you in and just ask you about winners and losers, and if those latte liberals that you keep talking about missed the forest for the trees and decided to attack Barack Obama and his signature health care plan and his immigration policies instead of going after Donald Trump.
Well, I certainly think the winner overall the two nights probably was Elizabeth Warren and probably Julian Castro. Last night, though, as I sat there up front, I began wondering how many Republican commercials they were setting themselves up for by attacking the most popular Democrat in the world, Barack Obama, and how they were showing their political desperation, that in trying to go after the front runner, Joe Biden, they would even sacrifice trying to throw Barack Obama in front of the bus, which does not show real stability and self-confidence. It really shows desperation, and I don't know who is advising them. I think when you looked at the actual debate, though, Joe, Biden was able to defend himself. He was steady. He was not great, but he survived, and I think he lives to hold on for now being the front runner. But the shots that some of the others took hurt them in their base. When you sit and watch Kamala Harris having to defend a judge saying that we're going to let 1,000 people out of jail that you let stay in there unconstitutionally, when you hear my friend Cory Booker being accused of, you hired Rudy Giuliani's police guy and did stop and frisk against blacks in Newark. This hurts them in their base. So whereas Biden may not have added anything, he subtracted from their base, which is very, very, very bad in politics. So I think it was overall a fair night for Biden. I think some of the opposition hurt because it hit them where they hurt. But this whole suicide mission of going after Barack Obama smells like desperation. And I think that it certainly shows that that some of them are just not ready for where they are, and that is where you can take incoming fire as well as you can shoot fire out. You and I, Joe, have built a career taking shots at people, but we also know how to take a shot without throwing our mama in front of the bus.
yeah, that we do. Wouldn't want to do that. But boy, last night, as I saw some of these candidates doing that, I think about all the conversations you and I have about the fact that Joe Biden, what he has going for him, is that there is still a deep well of support for Barack Obama, especially in the black community. 97% of Democrats overall think Barack Obama did a great job as president of the United States. I'm wondering, how does it impact these candidates that are trashing Barack Obama's signature health care achievement and trashing him and his immigration policies instead of Donald Trump? How's that going to impact them in the churches in South Carolina and across the Deep South?
It's going to have them invited to join the church and repent of their political sins, because that's what it is. You're forgetting, and I'm saying this to the candidates, how hard he had to fight to get the Affordable Care Act. Those of us that had access to him in the civil rights community were on the Hill seeing he had to fight to get something done no other president can do. But as one that ran for president and debated on the same Fox stage, The last thing I would have done is keep reminding people that Joe Biden was connected to Barack Obama, who's the most popular person in the Democratic Party. I would have tried to sever the ties with he and Obama. Why would you remind somebody that he was with something that is something that 90-something% of the people watching love? I mean, it's just not good political skills. Make them forget he was with Obama. Don't remind them.
So the first major debate of the night came between Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris on their proposals for health care. It was the first topic of the night, as it was 2 nights ago as well. The former vice president then was joined by Senator Michael Bennet in defending their health care positions, both rallying around their support of Obamacare.
The senators had several plans so far. There's no talk about the fact that the plan in 10 years will cost $3 trillion. You will lose your employer-based insurance. And to be very blunt and to be very straightforward, you can't beat President Trump with double talk on this plan.
Unfortunately, Vice President Biden, you're just simply inaccurate in what you're describing. The reality is that our plan will bring health care to all Americans under a Medicare for All system. Your plan, by contrast, leaves out almost 10 million Americans.
The plan, no matter how you cut it, costs $3 trillion. Secondly, it will require middle-class taxes to go up, not down. Thirdly, it will eliminate employer-based insurance. And fourthly, what happens in the meantime?
First of all, the cost of doing nothing is far too expensive. Second, we are now paying $3 trillion a year for health care in America. In 2019 in America, for a Democrat to be running for president with a plan that does not cover everyone, I think is without excuse.
I believe we should finish the job we started with the Affordable Care Act, with a public option that gives everybody in this audience the chance to pick for their family whether they want private insurance or public insurance. It requires drug companies to be negotiated with by Medicare, and it provides competition. That is totally different from the plan that Senator Warren and Senator Sanders and Senator Harris have proposed, which would make illegal employer-based health insurance in this country and massively raise taxes on the middle class to the tune of $30 trillion, as Joe Biden said.
The folks I talk to about health insurance say that their health insurance isn't working for them. There's tens of millions of Americans who don't even have health insurance, tens of millions more who have health insurance they can barely make work because of the copays, the deductibles, the premiums, the out-of-pocket expenses. There's this mythology that somehow all these folks are in love with their insurance in America. What I hear from union members and from hardworking middle-class people is they wish they had better insurance.
My response is, Obamacare is working. The way to build this and get to it immediately is to build on Obamacare. Go back and take back all the things that Trump took away, provide a public option, meaning every single person in America would be able to buy another option if they didn't like their employer plan, or if they're on Medicaid, they'd automatically be in the plan.
So, Steve Ratner, this is a different version of the debate we saw the night before, except it was more high profile because the person defending Obamacare and the person speaking out against the elimination of private insurance was the front runner in the race. 2 nights ago, it was John Delaney and it was Steve Bullock. Last night, it was Joe Biden. Kamala Harris seems to be going back and forth on her health care plan. We talked to her the morning after the debate in Miami. I asked her if she's for eliminating private insurance. She said, no, I'm not. Where is she on inside her plan, the details of it, and what's the truth about what she proposes?
Look, first of all, I think one of the things we've learned in these 2 debates is healthcare is the most emotional issue, the most important issue in America. Nobody is happy with their health care, but I think Americans are smart enough to know that there are a variety of alternatives, some which make sense. There are basically 3 camps. You've got the Medicare for All camp, Bernie and Elizabeth. Pure Medicare for all. You've got, on the other end, the Biden, let's call it Biden for a second, which is mend it, don't end it.
Right.
Make some changes and fix it. And then you've got a bunch of people in the middle, of which Kamala Harris is certainly the most visible, who are trying to weave their way through this and have some version of Medicare for all, some version of, but you don't have to give up your private insurance. And I think to the average American, it was probably unbelievably confusing. I think at the end of the day, the big winners from last night were actually Warren and Sanders, because I don't think anybody last night really had a breakthrough moment. I think Biden did okay. I think Kamala Harris was, as we said, a bit unsteady. I think Michael Bennet was great, but whether that matters or not, we'll find out. And for the rest of them, I think it was a lot of this back and forth and so on. And I think I think what scares me in a way as a centrist Democrat is we're still in a situation where Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren really stand out of the two nights for having strong positions that no one was able to take down.
Yeah, and Jonathan, Joe Biden's argument is, let's have a public option. So in other words, if you like your private insurance, keep it. If not, here's a system in place that can cover you.
That's right. And the healthcare fight is sort of the proxy for the larger struggle within the Democratic Party right now. Is it Obamaism with some incremental changes, or is it some sweeping change that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and some of the voices last night seem to want to enact? And to do that, to try to cleave Joe Biden from Obama, it's turning into attacks on the vice president. And there were moments last night where it felt like it was 9 against 1. And he did. He was stronger than he was in the first debate. Certainly, he was able to land some punches. We knew he was able to counterattack some of what Senator Harris did, Senator Booker did. He was very strong in basically eviscerating some of Senator Gillibrand and Mayor de Blasio's arguments there. Lower tier candidates, but it showed some fight that he was lacking the last time around. And I think that mattered, since certainly we know any general election debate with Donald Trump is going to involve a lot of fight. But there were other moments where Joe Biden still stumbled. He still seemed a little bit not in control of the facts. A couple of random moments where he'd cut himself off by going anyway and just stop talking. And at the end, in the final argument, when he tried to give his website, he ended up trying to give the text number, to sign up for his thing. It was one of those little blunders that won't quiet the criticism that maybe he is too old or lost a step. But I think those around him also suffered some blows. I thought Senator Booker did a solid job yesterday, certainly raised his profile some. But Senator Harris, who came in as the most obvious alternative, though a strong start, certainly was very uneven as the debate went along and took some hits from other contenders and didn't really seem to have an answer for them.
So, Adrian Elrod, I guess my takeaway is that Biden won by surviving, and all the others lost by going after Biden instead of like the huge fire in front of them, that is Donald Trump. Anything else I missed? Any other standouts?
No, Mika, I think you're exactly right. I mean, Joe Biden didn't need to have a pitch-perfect performance last night. He just needed to do a good job. He needed to actually get through it. And I thought he did a really good job articulating his position on defending Obamacare, making it clear that we've got to get this fixed. We've got some tweaks that need to be made, but we don't need to completely overhaul the system. I think Kamala Harris still has some work to do in terms of sort of figuring out exactly where she stands on her health care proposal. I do think Cory Booker did a good job last night. And, he was the only one, Mika, that I saw on stage who really took the battle to Trump. He made it clear that Donald Trump he's the one who wants to completely take away your health care. I was surprised that more candidates didn't try to draw that contrast. I think Kirsten Gillibrand had some good moments. I certainly think Michael Bennet had some good moments. I'm not sure, to Steve's point, if that's really going to matter in the long run. We've got to keep in mind that the threshold for the next debate is really, really difficult to achieve for a lot of candidates. So we might actually see a debate in September where you've got maybe 8 to 9, 10 candidates all on the same stage in one night, which I think we need, because I think we need to start seeing the tier 1 candidates really have that debate together on stage.
Yeah, I think it's time to winnow it down. Mike Barnicle and Jonathan Lemire, I think the best way to put it is that the Vice President held serve last night. I don't know that I'd say he won, but he held serve, didn't do himself a lot of harm, and some of his main challengers had uneven nights as well. So I don't see a huge change in the poll. One institution that did not hold serve yesterday, the Boston Red Sox, who just decided, I guess, that they did not want to repeat as World Series champions. Mike Barnicle and Jonathan Lemire, what happened?
Well, Joe, I think the Red Sox were much like a lot of the people on the stage last night during the Democratic debate. They didn't know what their position was. So they waited for the trade deadline to arrive at 4 o'clock. They knew they had a need for at least one bullpen arm. Myself or Jonathan could come out in the 7th inning and do equally as well as the people they have there now. It was let me tell you, at a minimum, it was truly disappointing that they did zero in a time of need.
Jonathan Lemire, you don't. It's like you don't have to be a statistician and a political scientist to know that when Barack Obama has a 97% approval rating, you don't attack him, right? If you want Democratic votes. Likewise, if you just watched one or two Boston Red Sox games this year, you know they needed somebody in the bullpen. And they sat there and did nothing. They sat there and did nothing when they had a chance, it's over now, to actually repeat as World Series champions. I guess, like Donald Trump, they're just tired of all that winning.
The Red Sox bullpen certainly has a 97% disapproval rating among its fans. And you're right. This is a team that won 108 games last year. You know, they certainly had their struggles this year, but a move or two away, you get in the playoffs. The postseason in October baseball has become such a crapshoot. You never know. Maybe you're the team that catches fire. But if this was a debate, if this show was simply talking about do a post-game analysis of the Red Sox trading deadline rather than the debate itself, it would be about 3 seconds, and we'd all give it a grade of an F.
Why are we dealing with this pain today? Why?
Yeah, why? Well, speaking of pain, let me go to Willie.
Yeah,
Willie,
we
have a scenario, and I'm dead serious. We have a scenario where the New York Yankees could end up winning 107, 108 games through the year, and end up getting beaten in the World Series because they don't have the pitchers to line up against the Astros, who were the big winners. And my gosh, the Indians made themselves real contenders down the stretch either. I mean, the Yankees are a great team, but this past weekend in Boston proved they're not really lined up to win postseason series. Maybe they will, but man, to pick up nobody, no pitchers in the Yankees, I don't get it.
And that was, Mike Barnicle can tell you, that was the concern at Fenway over the weekend as we Yankee fans watched the Yankees give up 19 runs and 10 runs and 7 runs. Brian Cashman, the Yankees GM, was on the phone all weekend. Apparently nobody was calling him back because the Yankees did not get a starting pitcher, which is the only thing they need. Great bullpen, great lineup. No starting pitching. So we had, I would argue, the Yankees, again, we're the little engine that could. We're the scrappy little club just trying to catch up to the world champion Red Sox.
I think I can.
We actually had the worst day, and the Astros got Zach Greinke. Yeah. They have to be the World Series favorites now. Yeah, is that good, playing the underdog? Did that work?
It didn't work.
You're a fraud.
No.
Okay.
Disgraceful.
Yeah, all right. We're just getting started this morning, still ahead. We've got the other big moments queued up in the control room from last night's debate. We'll run through the top takeaways and what they mean for the race going forward. And 4 candidates, Senators Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Michael Bennet will all be our guests right here on Morning Joe. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
The person that's enjoying this debate most right now is Donald Trump, as we pit Democrats against each other, while he is working right now to take away Americans' health care.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.